Okay, so I just hit record as far as anybody knows, and now we are into the next one, our next episode. And I totally bailed out on the bonus material last time, so we'll have extra bonus this time. Apologize to all of you guys. So this episode, I think we're going to get into what everybody maybe hates a little bit. It's a little bit of like soft skills. I think this is the one that we'll go talk about basically the difference between advocating for something and arguing. And this is basically, yes, about your team and with your team. So when you're sitting there in your team meetings and you're talking about design, it is, are we advocating for a better piece of software, a better solution, or we're really just arguing our point? And we're going to talk about that a little bit and see where we go. Both of us have had lots of experiences, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So I will just up front, I think before we get into this, I don't know if this will be your bonus, your pre-bonus is take what we say with a grain of salt. I may or may not mention that in the podcast, depending on how I go, because we, like you, are developers first. And sometimes some of us are known, rightly so, for not being like the easiest people to deal with. Does that sound good to you? I think sort of as like a direction we can take with this one.
Yeah, I definitely like that. The other thing too, maybe we can kind of slip it in is given that we're also still kind of in a hybrid world, be careful with your communication tools like Zoom and things like that to allow times for pausing in that so we don't necessarily argue by talking over someone just because there isn't that pause. Like you can't always see that pause in communication. So maybe we can kind of work that into this discussion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so. That's like, it's a little different. That's not something I thought about, but it's definitely, as you mentioned it, it's something that's like very important, especially in the world of Zoom and things like that. Okay, so cool. We'll dive right into it then. Well, hello and welcome back. We are continuing the developer journey. We are Developreneur. We are building better developers. You hopefully are a developer. If not, maybe you'll be a developer by the time we get through all of this. I'm not promising anything because we're not going to teach you how to code in the next 25 to 30 minutes. But if you follow us over time, if you go check out our site, you will have a lot of tools and the ability to do that. And actually, yes, as I think about it, you go to places like developmeneur.com, school.developmeneur.com, and we have the material, we have the content that you can learn how to code in a couple different languages and a couple different environments. But before you do that, you need to sit here and listen to this episode because we already here. We put this thing together. You might as well. And me, the guy talking right now, is Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders of Developreneur and Building Better Developers. I'm also a founder of RB Consulting. And I have to take a deep breath sometimes because I enjoy doing all of this so much. But part of what I enjoy on the RB Consulting side is helping people help themselves with the technology that's out there. And this is through simplification, through automation, through integration, is taking all of the things that are out there and helping a customer figure out what is the best path forward for them, whether it is using a couple of sites and tools that already exist, or whether it's all the way on the other end of building an entirely custom solution for their business. Those are the kinds of things that like help me jump out of bed every day, excited to step into the day. Speaking of that, looking at good things and bad things. Good thing, as you get into, this is something that as you get further into your career, you may run into this as well, is that you may be like me where you don't really network a whole lot. You don't go to a lot of networking events and stuff like that. However, there is the word of mouth stuff. There are people that we've talked to over the years that we've worked with, that people have pointed us to, conversations we've had. And sometimes those turn into somebody coming out of the blue basically and saying, hey, I was thinking about you. I've got this project, or I've got this side project, or I've got this bigger project, or somebody's looking to hire somebody that happens to be a good fit for what you do. I had one of those come out of the blue just the other day. It was a guy that I just sort of kept touching base periodically here and there, and then suddenly, like, I hadn't heard from him in a while, and I get a nice little one that's like, "Hey, this is where we're at. Things are still going good, but." They probably won't. We're seeing there may be some changes. We may need somebody, so I want to make sure we keep in touch. I'm like, cool. That is nice to know that there are people out there thinking about you. Bad thing. I really don't. Oh gosh, now I got to struggle with a bad thing because I don't have one off the top of my head. Oh, bad thing may very well be Zoom. Because as I'm recording this, I am going to potentially bump up against somebody else that is in my company that will be effectively using my Zoom. So I will have maybe two meetings going on at the same time. And I don't think Zoom likes that. So if towards the end of this, I start talking really fast and try to get out of here, now you know why. On the other side is Michael. So go ahead and introduce yourself and give some good and bad of your latest day or last couple of days.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Malash. I'm one of the co-founders of Developreneur, Building Better Developers, and I'm also the founder of Envision QA. Now, we at Envision QA, we like to help small to mid-sized businesses and clinicians help build software that works for them. And we typically, our main vision and goal is to focus on quality. So all of our development that we do is test-driven, test first. We make sure that we do not release software that does not meet the requirements and the expectations. Good and bad. I'll start with the bad. So one of the things I've run into recently is sometimes I run into some difficult conversations that you have to have, and it kind of puts you in a funk. You kind of feel bad, and it takes time to process that. So initially, you're just feeling depressed. The good side of that is once you get some rest, once you get some mindfulness and you really think through it, you really realize that it is a benefit, that you learned something new. It was more a positive critique than something negative. And so that was kind of a nice takeaway. It's like I went through a funk, but at the end of it, it's like, that really wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So you may run into that yourselves. So one cool takeaway from that is, the grass is always greener on the other side, and it's always sunnier maybe tomorrow. Pass it back to you.
Following on that one of the best things I heard, and I forget where I heard it, was that you personally at this point are undefeated. You have gone through life and it has not beaten you yet. So I thought that was a great way to look at every day. It's like, no matter how things are going, you're at least right now, you are undefeated. You're number one, baby. So speaking of that, I don't know how I'm going to tie it back to the topic, but we'll pretend that I did. Today we're really going to talk about fighting for what's right, fighting for where you want to go with your team. And it can be arguing. It can be something where you're just like you're butting heads with your teammates, and it's personal, that you're really tied to this solution or this approach for whatever reason. Or it could be something more along the lines of advocating, where you're trying to build, where you're really trying to say, look, this is the best solution, this is a better way to go. The problem is, like I just had that slip basically, is if you say this is the best solution, that right away is going to get you into trouble, because if somebody else has a different one, you're saying theirs isn't as good as yours. And that may or may not be true. And honestly, it is probably not provable, because you're dealing with ifs, essentially. You're saying, well, I think that if we take this process, then we will get here the best possible way. But it is, you don't know that. There are no guarantees. We know there are no guarantees in this. So when you get into these situations, the first thing you want to do is check yourself. Is this something where you're just personally stuck on this, where it's like, this is what I know, and maybe I'm scared that this other thing I'm going to have to learn, it's going to be more difficult for me? Or it's something where I'm not sure that we can do this, that I can do it, or that the team can do it. And in those cases, be honest, I think, is the best way to go about it. And say, hey, look, I have concerns about us being able to execute this. Let people know that that's a risk. For example, you're in with a team, and everybody's let's just say everybody's a React developer. And now somebody is like, but we love Angular, and now Angular needs to be the thing to do. And you can be like, okay, yeah, I want to learn something new. And there's those pros, but then it could be like, well, wait a minute. We don't know that. We don't have an expert on it. So now that's a risk. Now, this is how you want to have those conversations, is break away from the personal attachments to some of these things, and instead try to step back and take a look at it from the end user's point of view. If you keep the customer in mind, then the advocating for your customer is going to be sort of like the natural step for you. The arguing with your team is not going to be, because ideally now everybody is moving in this, rowing the boat in the same direction. Everybody wants a happier customer. Now we can disagree on how we get there, but honestly, most of the time it's not going to be 100% one or 100% the other. So we can, in these, I think sometimes, if not all the time, find a way to find some middle ground. Now, there are limits. There are things where it's like, well, we're going to use tool A or we're going to use tool B. Well, you're not going to use both of them. So yeah, you have to pick one. And sometimes it's something where you're going to have to say, all right, we're going to choose, and then we're going to move on. Once the choice has been made, the choice has been made. Or it may be that you're going into, you're working with a client. The choice has already been made because they already have invested in it or something along those lines. So the number one thing is try to, and I don't know why we as developers so often have issues with this. I think it's because we are creators. We are really creatives at the end of the day. And these are our babies that we have created that are out there and are blowing up systems or whatever they happen to be doing. But these are things that we have put, especially if we're a developer. If we're just writing code, I think sometimes we can just like, yeah, I'm just slinging code. Who cares? If we're a developer, we've invested in this. We've spent time thinking about the problem, thinking about the solution, thinking about the design, and looking at the requirements. So we are invested. We have put time in. We have got sometimes blood, sweat, and tears that have been a part of this project or this path that we're taking. And so we do have that emotional kind of an attachment to it. The thing we need to do is, if we start having that feel, that thing inside you of, it's like, this doesn't feel right, or I'm getting a little bit angry, or I'm a little angry or a little scared or a little hurt, is to recognize that and back your truck up a little bit, that boop, 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 back it up a little bit and look at it from the customer's point of view, from the external point of view. Is try to get away from, I put work into this, and instead, what do we really, and this goes back so much again to the why, what did we really want to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Because if you can do that, if you can back all of that up and say, okay, what is it that we are trying to do here? What are the goals of this project? Then that's going to a lot of times help us, help our team and ourselves by saying, is this thing that we are arguing for or advocating for, is this moving the ball forward in those goals? Is it going to achieve those goals better, or is it not? And if it's a draw, if it's something where we as a team are arguing, we could be arguing 10 different things. But if the resolution of that doesn't impact the goals, then we need to step up and basically say, look, I don't think any decision matters. All we need is a decision. Whatever decision we make, there's going to be pros, there's going to be cons. We can do some analysis of it, but sometimes it's like we just need a decision and then we need to stick with it. And in those cases, yeah, you may be more comfortable, or you like one decision or another, or the guy next to you, somebody's like your best friend, so you want to advocate for what they're doing. But if it's not moving the ball forward, if it's not part of the why, if it's not part of the goals, then you're wasting your time. You are arguing something that has no impact. And we hate it when customers do that. I remember years ago, we spent probably 2 or 3 weeks where we were constantly going back to complaining about a customer that we got into a demo. We're trying to demonstrate all of these features. And there was 2 or 3 places that there was effectively a spelling error. It was like an improper chemical math was in there as just example data. And the customer spent an hour. They were arguing amongst themselves what that chemical math should have been. Wasted all of our time, didn't give us any feedback on the application, didn't give us any feedback that helped us move anything forward. It was them arguing essentially semantics or grammar when it had nothing to do with the application. So we need to think about that when we get into some of these arguments, we get into these situations where it's like, we really need to do this. Now, if you've been doing this for a while, you probably have gotten out of that. If you haven't, when we come out of school, almost all of us, a couple years out of, or if we come out of a boot camp or we've been to a conference, we're all pumped up about whatever the heck it was that we learned and we covered there. And we'll say, this is what we need to do. And we will fight for it, all that kind of good stuff. And sometimes, yes, it is an advocacy thing because we see it. We are believers. We think it is the better way to go. That's cool. That's great. We need to have those discussions, but we need to realize that not everybody necessarily is going to agree. And whatever the solution is that we think that we just got sold is the best solution is not always the best solution. There's so many times that I've walked into places, we've had conversations with developers and teams and customers, and we have this grand vision of what we're going to build. And it makes no sense to ever go there because the customer really, they don't need that big world of us stuff that we're offering. They need this little bitty ball down here. That's all they need. And we need to make sure that we have that as part of our focus. Now, I will pause there because I know you got a couple different things. And I'll throw it over to you and see what are some of your thoughts on this and where do you see, in particular, like the tension points and the ways to relieve the tension when we're dealing with these kinds of, is it personal, is it not kinds of, we'll call them discussions here as opposed to arguments or even debates.
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of points between the arguing and the advocating within your own teams. Now, some of the things I didn't hear that have really impacted me and really been kind of nail biters more on the arguing when we're trying to advocate, it becomes more arguing is when you're dealing in more of a corporate culture and cross team culture. One of the biggest problems, and I've run into this quite a bit, is if you are working cross teams in an organization that does not have standardized development environments, or every team is working in different languages or different architectures, you are going to run into a lot of problems where your team may be advocating for customer rights, but you're running into the argumenting of architectures or platforms. And it's not necessarily meant to be an argument, but it's more along the lines of the culture itself is set up to fail because the corporation itself has not kind of set the standards or possibly even the mentality of how everyone should work together. Everyone's kind of working in their silos, and when you have to work together, you're going to run into that argumenting, that confrontation environment. To kind of avoid that, look at it, go into those meetings more along the lines of what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are the end goals? What are we trying to get out of this? And that can hopefully flip that conversation to be more of the advocating of where are we driving this car or where's the end goal, which can avoid a lot of those arguments. But they are going to happen. And it's unfortunately the nature of the beast within those cultures or those environments. With corporate, it's even worse because in a corporation, you have thousands of people, multiple teams, multiple architects. You have no idea, or the top level may have no idea what's really going down in the trenches. And you may even have outdated policies, procedures, tools, languages, styles that you need to use. And if you come into this culture, your team has been acquired through an acquisition, or you're just a new, department that's been stood up. Hey, we need this feature, go out and find the best way to do this. You go do that and you come back and it's like, oh, now you need to do it in this. Well, wait a minute. You asked us to do X, but now you're forcing us to do Y. You've now kind of forced that argument, or you're self-imposing that argument because you've advocated you want this, but then when they come back with that, you're now saying, oh no, wait, now we're going to put all these rules on top of it. So you're self-inflicting the arguments. So you may have said, hey, developers, go brainstorm, go give me the best practices. But when they come back and they start explaining it to you, your managers or management may come back and say, well, that's not what we want. And that's going to immediately force you into that argumentative because you've done all this work. You want to justify what you did, and you are very quickly going to get into that head-butting argumentation. And I see you wanting to jump in on that. So what are your thoughts on how we can kind of avoid that? I think in a lot of the areas I've been in, it can be demoralizing. I've seen teams go from like, hey, we're 110% gung ho, we're going, we're striving, we're pushing the boundaries, and then we hit a brick wall. And it's not our brick wall, but it's a self imposed brick wall by the corporation.
Well, I think one of the things to think about is really what is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. This is one of these cases where I've been in those. I can think of a couple where it's very demoralizing where you sit there and like, this is somebody like, this is a project, this is what you're working on. And you've been on a team, maybe that's working on it for 6 months or a year or something like that. And then it gets canceled or something along those lines. And you believe in it, you've built it, you've done all your stuff. And your employer, the company, the customer, whatever it is, it disappears. Those things happen. What I would remind you in those situations is you have probably done this to somebody else as well. Maybe not on the same level, but think about it. Think about, have you ever, for example, like maybe you've gone out to buy a house and you started to like, you're like, oh yeah, I think we're going to put an offer on the house and then didn't. Or you were going to move and then you didn't. So the real estate agent put a bunch of stuff together and now you're not going to do it. Or even the most simple stuff is maybe you walked into a restaurant and something happened and you had to leave. You ordered some food or something and then you had to leave. There's things that are out there that like on small scale, but also on a larger scale, stuff happens. We may have like, you could have stuff like say a vacation that you've got planned and then you get sick or something happen or you lose your job or things like that. There's all these things that now you've canceled that because you can't do it. So again, instead of taking it personally and treating it as they are disrespecting the work you have done, the thing I've found, and I've done, this is something that actually I learned from a side hustle point of view that I think very often helps. It helps me as much as it helps them. Is I'll say, hey, if you're going to shut this thing down, or you don't want this, then at least here is the research that went into it. If you don't want this product because we looked at it and everybody looked at it, it's like the market research says it's not going to happen. Well, that's okay. I want you to at least. Here is the market research that was done. Here's some of the thoughts on that. So if you ever do come back to it, you've got to start on it. And those kinds of things, I found that at least you feel like it helps you feel like you have at least done something and your stuff wasn't thrown in the trash. Now, it could be that it was thrown in the trash. However, it's one of those things that at least you can say like, okay, we did the work. We got to a certain point, and some cases it's like you almost want to feel good that we proved that wasn't, with our work, we got to a point that proved that this wasn't a good choice. If you want to think of an example that'll maybe help you, it would be what happens if you're working on a cure for cancer and you end up, it kills somebody because it's poisonous. You want to, at least the good thing is that's not going to go forward because you don't want to kill everybody in the world. You're trying to create a cure for cancer. Now that's extreme and we hopefully are not in those situations. However, this is where you have to realize that there is personal and there is business. Now, if a manager or an organization or group or something like that says, hey, we need you to go do this stuff, and they come back and they tell you, well, no, none of those answers make sense, then it is not shutting down what you did or disrespecting what you did. This is an opportunity for you to say, okay, let's talk through this because we made a mistake somewhere here because there was a disconnect. So what do we do to clean that thing up, to understand what we need to do moving forward? The last thing I'll put into that is that sometimes our best approach is, instead of saying, no, that's not the way to go to that organization or something like that, is find a way to take, like, I think of it, it's probably a graphic, comic kind of thing, but it's the idea of like somebody sitting there with a shotgun and then like a child with a shotgun and you sort of go in and you replace it with a water gun. Something like that. It's like, okay, you don't need this, but how about we use this instead? And that, just stopping from the absolutes of no, we can't do this, or yes, we got to do that. And like I said, best or worst, using those kinds of things, when we can tone that down. And again, it goes back to, we think about that customer, and that customer, if they like, think about them being right there. If you're arguing with somebody else in your team, in your organization, and the customer's right there, would they think that that is you advocating for them and that you guys are working towards something better for them? Are they going to say, you guys are a clown show? This is a circus. What is going on? You guys need to like grow up, put on put on your big boy pants and move forward and get the work done. So those are a couple of things that hopefully you can like have in your mind, I would think. So I'm going to throw that at you and it's like, does that help a little bit? Where are we going with this as far as like, is that in the ballpark of what you were throwing back at me?
Yeah, I really like that last analogy you kind of threw out there, trying to de-escalate, kind of take the feelings out of it. The last thing I will throw out there is between arguing and advocating, try to leave feelings out of it. If you start finding yourself oh, I feel this way because, back up. Almost treat it like the scientific method. If I push this, am I getting the expected outcome? Like Rob said, if we create poison, it's like a test. If it does not give us the outcome we wanted, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just one less thing we need to do going forward. So you've basically disproved something. You can check it off the list, move on. Think of it that way between arguing and advocating. If you find yourself stuck on something, check it off that maybe I need to let that go, move on, keep advocating for what's right, keep advocating for the customer, and keep driving for excellence and try to get away from those, backroom brawls, essentially, of arguing something that really doesn't matter. You want to be successful. You want the company to be successful. And if you get into an argument, is the argument really about the success of the company, the success of the project, or is it just egos getting in the way?
I think in closing this one, it goes back to something is don't make perfect the enemy of good. Is don't get stuck where this light on a shining on a hill is where we want to go. And we may all agree on that, but realize that may not be reality. That may not be what we can do. So sometimes the best approach, instead of going all in on something or going all the way there, is just find a way to make an incremental move in that direction. And this may be the things that come up with developer places all the times. It's things like building in unit tests for everything, or documenting things, user manuals, build scripts, pipelines, code reviews. There's all of these things that we do that we, for the most part, complain that it's never done to the right level. And a lot of times it's not because there's just not the time, there's not the resources that we're having to, there's technical debt for a reason. And it's because we're trying to serve the customer by getting something in front of them. And we're making conscious decisions that getting this in front of them, getting them a product that's 80% there is better than them not having a product that someday will be 100% there. And so those are the kinds of things we do need to keep in mind that I think will help us as we step forward. What will help us as we step forward is for you guys to shoot us an email at info@developaneur.com. We'd love to hear from you. We're soon going to be getting into our next season. Cruising right along here. It's amazing how many episodes we've got and all that kind of good stuff. And we're just going to continue on. There's no plan for a break or anything like that. So it's just going to be bam, we end this season, bam, we start right into the next one. So buckle up because it's just going to carry on. You can leave us feedback, email address. You can leave it comments anywhere, whether it's you look at the YouTube app, YouTube site, and all of the videos that are there. You can leave it for any of our stuff that's out there. It doesn't even have to be the podcast. You can look at some of our past material. You can go to school.developaneur.com. You can go to developaneur.com. You can leave comments on any of the blog articles out there. You can just however you want it. You use US mail if you want. If you want to send us a letter, I'm pretty sure we maybe somewhere have an address, mailing address. If not, send us an email and we'll give you a mailing address so you can send us a letter. Yeah, it's a little backwards, but hey, that's how we will work to help you out if for some reason you need to put a stamp on something. Obviously, I think we've reached the end of this because I've reached the end of my mental capacity in some way. So go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. All right, as I mentioned, bonus material before, I've got like a tight window right here. So we're going to have let's like bam right through a couple of good little bonus pieces.
So we didn't touch on them last time, but I just wanted to throw out some time tracking tools like Toggle. There's screen time with your iPad or iOS, where it can actually tell you what you're spending time on, what apps, or you could actually get like app tracking tools so you can actually see what you're working on at certain times and kind of get a summary at the end of your week or month or whatever you're trying to do. So just simple ways. There are lots of apps, lots of tools out there. Track your time. Don't ignore it. If you don't know what you're working on, get those complete system tracking tools. But if you are very methodical, use like the individual tools, start time, stop. Just keep track of what you're doing.
I was just gonna say, make sure you do that with the non-billable stuff as well. If you have questions, like this is one of the things is a bonus is if you want a little app that you can easily like, because I use something, RB Consulting, we've got something that we put together that is just very simple, highly customized. Let me know. I can throw that at you because it's a great way to just basically, here's a project. Is it billable or not? What kind of rate are we talking about? All that kind of stuff that's like super simple, what can help you keep track of that kind of stuff. And it is, like I said, most importantly, it's the non-billable. Have something, have a project, whatever it is, a code that you can apply it to that is the non-billable business development kind of stuff. Because you want to see at the end of the week, the month, the year, how much time you spent on your business versus in your business and making sure that you're getting paid for that as well.
And last little bonus for this episode is if you're face to face, use things like post-it notes, whiteboards, put your ideas or what the argument and points on a board. Put them where everyone can see and people can add post-it notes to do their ideas. If you're virtual, use things like Miro, idea boards, and things like that to kind of flush out your ideas. If it is too argumentative, make it anonymous. Make it where people can just put whatever they want out there, and then have someone kind of, you know, shoot, lost the word. Basically manage the meeting,
Facilitate.
facilitate, facilitate the ideas that are being thrown out there. And a lot of times that helps take away a lot of that argumentative because you don't know who's throwing it out there. So if it is kind of a personal grudge, that's removed. It's more, what are the topics that you're walking through? What is it that you're trying? What's the end goal, essentially? So that's my last little tidbit for this one.
I would say just use in the world of using tools, use if you can use like any of those kinds of like shared idea boards, whiteboards, and things like that. Obviously, in person, actual whiteboards are great. Record the meeting so that you can come back to it if you need to. If you're remote, then there are virtual idea boards you can use. If you're using a tool that allows chat of some sort, then use team chats. Try not to do like sidebarring stuff, but to have at least sort of like a main, here's some of the ideas that we're going through. When you're in Zoom, this is one of the things that we talked about a little bit is like make sure that you're keeping an eye out on their face. So see if they're like talking, but they're maybe a little bit behind what you're hearing. So that you're not in a situation where everybody's talking over each other. If people don't have a live camera and instead it's just like a little image or something like that, then still try to make sure that you give some extra time. A bonus that you can do is, I think here, if it goes in a second, as you can see, one of these little things where it's like this little like raise your hand or lower your hand, stuff like that, is do some sort of a raising a hand or something. There are these, see, it took you too long. Will mine do it? Oh no, it doesn't like that. Super bonus. There we go. I'm that cool. But there's also, you can do React. You can do React kind of things. I don't want to. Why is it? It doesn't unreact me. Great. Okay. Oh, there it is. Finally got rid of it. You can do stuff like that is raise your hand. You could even like, if it's an actual, if you're on a camera, you can just say, hey, something like that. Or, you can do something. Ideally, it's raising your hand, or in the chat, say, hey, when I get a chance, I have a question or something along those lines, or put the question in the chat. So then somebody, especially if there's a facilitator, they can see that, hey, Michael's got a question. I want to, and you can either ask the question or allow that person to do it. And this is just like, 101. Mute yourself when you're not talking. If you're in a Zoom call, mute the stinking thing if you're not talking. A lot of times that's the first clue that somebody wants to talk is they will be muted and then they will unmute and you're like, "Hey, Michael just unmuted. I bet he wants to talk." So those are just a couple of things that will help you with the tenor of a conversation. Because if you end up talking over people because of the tools, then it ends up being confusing. And then people are trying to, like sort of back up. They're trying to talk about a conversation that happened a couple of minutes ago. Some other people are like ahead of the game. And now it becomes chaos. So find a way to, like, particularly if it gets heated or emotional in any way, everybody wants to talk. Everybody has something to put into the pot. And this is probably more so if you're in a face-to-face meeting, is allow people to just pause, take a turn, things like that. I haven't been in too many situations where it's like people are yelling and screaming on the table or something like that. I'm guessing I probably have, but usually, you want to avoid that. And you also want to avoid that on accident if you're in some sort of a remote thing where somebody's trying to say something and they've got a bad internet connection, or somebody's obviously saying something and they suddenly get muted or something along those lines. Is you need an extra pound of grace dealing with somebody when it's a remote conversation, because there may be something that's missing. And it goes to the more you can have face as part of that video, so you can see their expressions, you can understand the things that are part of the conversation that are not the words, all of the unspoken communication that we do. The more you can get that, the better. And understand that if you're using Slack or something like that, that there are emoticons and stuff like that you can add, but generally speaking, that text is devoid of emotion and context. And read it 4 or 5 times before you send it, just like an email, because sometimes you put something out there and the next thing you know, people are wondering what the hell you were thinking. And you look at it, you go, "Oh, I agree. What the hell was I thinking? That doesn't make any sense." So take your time. But now my time is done. So I got to wrap this one up. I went too long. I hope that you guys enjoyed the bonus material. I hope that you guys have enjoyed what we did this time better than last time, because I just jumped right through it. So I apologize so much. I beg your apologies. If you want to send me an email, it's another way. Send me an email at info@developernerd.com. I will be happy to send you an apology picture or something like that. I'll figure it out. Thank you so much for your time. And we will talk to you again next time around as we get closer and closer to wrapping up this season. Have yourself a good one.